I never believed in the UFO stories and abduction tales that circulated in Roswell. As a sergeant in the US Special Forces, my world was tangible and measurable, but on a January dawn, everything I knew crumbled. I was summoned to investigate an unidentified object that had crashed in the New Mexico desert. In 1996, I found myself face to face with the impossible. What followed was a night of horror and revelations, where the line between humanity and monstrosity blurred. Now, burdened with the secret, I struggle with guilt and doubt. Did I do the right thing? What does it truly mean to be human? My day-to-day life consisted of intensive training, tactical missions, and the camaraderie of my fellow soldiers. The military routine was my life, and any out-of-the-ordinary stories were simply unnecessary distractions. The rumors had always been there, whispered in the corners of bars and during dinner conversations. Local residents talked about unusual lights in the sky, animals disappearing without a trace, and people claiming to have been abducted by extraterrestrial creatures. To me, all of this was nothing more than folklore, stories to scare children and fuel the imagination of the gullible. I scoffed at these tales and those who gave them credence, convinced that my reality was much more solid. However, in recent days, something had changed. The lights in the sky were no longer just rumors. Several reliable witnesses claimed to have seen them. They were bright flashes, erratic movements that didn't correspond to any known aircraft. Despite my skepticism, I couldn't deny the growing unease that was palpable in the air. Rumors of abductions spread with more force, and although there were always charlatans seeking fame, something in the voices of the witnesses made me doubt, if only a little. It was the early morning of January 20th, 1996, exactly at 2:37 a.m., when my life took a turn. My Special Operations Unit received an urgent call. The tone in the commander's voice left no room for doubt. It was an extraordinary situation. According to preliminary reports, the U.S. Air Force had confronted an unidentified flying object in the skies over Roswell. After an intense encounter, the object had crashed in a desert area. "This is not a drill," the commander said, his voice grave and full of tension. "We have a situation in Roswell. An unidentified object has gone down. I need your team up and ready in 10 minutes. I jumped out of bed, still groggy, but adrenaline soon flooded my system. My comrades, equally surprised, moved quickly. We didn't know what to expect, but the urgency in the commander's voice was enough to make us understand the gravity of the situation. As we headed to the crash site, my mind was still struggling against the idea of the impossible. The path to the Roswell desert was wrapped in a tense silence, broken only by the noise of the engines and the voices of the officers coordinating the operation. The orders were clear. We had to reach the impact point, secure the area, and recover any object or being we found. Upon arrival, the scene was one of controlled chaos. Local law enforcement had cordoned off the area, keeping curious onlookers at bay and ensuring that no one got too close. The flashes of sirens and spotlights illuminated the desert, creating eerie shadows among the cacti and rock formations. The magnitude of the deployment made me understand the gravity of what we were about to face. "Team, deploy and maintain formation," I ordered, my voice firm despite the uncertainty. My men moved with precision, each taking their position as we advanced towards the heart of the impact site. As we moved deeper, we glimpsed something bright and strange to the touch. There were viscous fluids of iridescent colors mixing with the earth, forming disturbing puddles. The rocks and cacti around us were shattered, some split in half, as if an enormous force had ripped them from their roots. "This isn't the work of any aircraft we know," muttered one of my companions, his voice barely a whisper in the darkness. We entered further into the impact zone, and the air became thicker, charged with a sense of unease that gave us goosebumps. It was then that we found them. At first I thought they were human remains, But I soon realized my mistake. One body was torn apart, its limbs scattered grotesquely. It was a humanoid creature, but not human. Its skin was a grayish-green tone, and its eyes were large and empty. The horror of the scene hit me hard. "Sergeant, there are more over here," shouted one of the men from a few meters ahead. I quickly approached, finding 5 more equally mangled bodies. The sight was dantesque, and the stench of death was almost unbearable. I tried to stay calm, reminding myself that our mission was to secure the area and recover what we could. "There's one alive here!" The soldier's voice resonated with disbelief. I ran towards him, finding him bent over a 7th body. This creature, unlike the others, was still breathing, albeit with difficulty. Its skin was covered in deep wounds from which a green liquid oozed. Its eyes, filled with a mixture of pain and fear, locked onto mine. For a moment, I felt a strange connection, a mute plea in its gaze. "We need to take it to the base immediately," I ordered, trying not to show the agitation I felt. The creature was carefully placed in a black container designed for the safe transport of hazardous materials. "Quick, before this turns into a media spectacle," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. With the creature secured and the area under control, we began our return to the military base, knowing that what we had found would change our lives forever. What awaited us there would be even more disconcerting. "How is it?" I asked our team's medic, a man with a serious face and tired eyes who had been in charge of monitoring the creature's condition during the transfer. "It's critical, Sergeant," he replied without looking up from the container. "The wounds are deep and it's losing a lot of fluid. I don't know how much longer it can hold on." "We have to keep it alive," I said, though I wasn't sure why. Perhaps it was a soldier's instinct to protect what had been entrusted to him. Perhaps it was the pleading look I had seen in the creature's eyes. Whatever it was, I felt I had to do everything possible to ensure its survival. Upon arriving at the base, the protocol was set in motion with cold, calculated efficiency. The creature was quickly transferred to a medical room specially prepared for emergency cases. Teams of doctors and scientists were waiting, their faces showing a mixture of curiosity and determination. "Prepare for emergency surgery," ordered the chief medical officer, a man with an authoritative voice and steady hands. "We need to stabilize it before we can do anything else." I observed from a window, separated by a thick glass panel, as the doctors worked frantically. Bandages, surgical instruments, and intravenous fluids were handled skillfully. The creature, although wounded, seemed remarkably resilient. Its breathing, though labored, remained constant, and its eyes kept moving, observing everything around it with a mixture of pain and caution. "What do you think it is, Sergeant?" The voice of one of my men, Johnson, pulled me from my thoughts. He was standing next to me, his face showing the same mixture of disbelief and fascination that I felt. "I don't know, Johnson," I answered honestly, "but whatever it is, it's clear it's not from this world." As the doctors continued working, my team and I headed to the storage area to review the remains of the craft we had recovered. The metal parts and equipment fragments were strange, with a design and technology we didn't recognize. Some of the fragments seemed to be made of materials that defied our notions of physics and chemistry. "These are not terrestrial materials," said one of the scientists, examining a fragment under an intense light. "This is something completely new." "We need to make sure this doesn't leave here," I said, aware of the implications. "If this leaks, it could cause massive panic." The rest of the day became a series of back and forth between the medical room and the storage area. I guarded the creature, observing every move the doctors made. Its skin, of a grayish-green tone, was covered with sensors and tubes. From time to time, its eyes would open and look at me, full of an intelligence that made me feel uncomfortable. Finally, the chief medical officer came out of the room, wiping his hands with a bloodied towel. "It's stable for now, but I don't know how much longer it can hold on in this state. We need answers, and fast." I nodded, knowing that interrogation was inevitable. Meanwhile, we collected more remains from the craft, trying to piece together the puzzle of what had happened in that desert. The military high command arrived at noon. General Thompson, a man known for his toughness and lack of scruples, took control of the situation. There was no room for compassion in his method. His goal was clear: to obtain all possible information, regardless of the means. The creature was transferred to a room specially conditioned for interrogation. It was a cold, sterile room with metal walls and a table in the center. The creature, although weak, kept its eyes open, observing everything with a mixture of curiosity and fear. "Attention," said General Thompson, addressing those present. "We need to get answers. We don't know what intentions these creatures have, and we can't afford any risks." The interrogation began brutally. Thompson used intimidation methods, showing weapons and threatening the creature with various torture instruments. The creature didn't react verbally, but its large, expressive eyes clearly showed fear and desperation. Thompson shouted, slamming his fist on the table, "Tell us where you come from and what you're doing here." It was then that the creature began to emit a sound, an almost inaudible whisper that resonated in our minds more than in our ears. Suddenly, a wave of images and sensations invaded us. We were receiving telepathic messages. "I am Zephyr," a voice said in my mind, clear and serene. "I come from the Aquila constellation, from the star Tarazed. Our race does not seek conflict. We are here for the minerals of your planet, necessary to save ours from catastrophe." The revelations left us stunned. The creature continued transmitting information, showing us images of its planet, a beautiful but dying place, and explaining that its mission was to collect specific minerals from the rock formations in Roswell. "Minerals," Thompson muttered, still distrustful. "Why should I believe you?" The general's distrust was palpable. Despite the clear explanations, he wasn't willing to lower his guard. He ordered one of the doctors to prepare a scalpel. The atmosphere in the room became even tenser. "If you don't want to talk, we'll really make you talk," Thompson said with cold determination. "Start with one of the fingers." The doctor, visibly uncomfortable, obeyed the orders. He took the scalpel and approached the creature. With a quick movement, he amputated one of the creature's fingers. A silent scream of pain resonated in our minds, a desperate plea for mercy. "We're telling the truth," the creature's telepathic voice was anguished. "We don't want war. We need the minerals to save our home. Please understand." It pleaded, "Take me to my ship. I will request to be rescued, and we will never return to your planet." But Thompson wasn't convinced. "If there are more of you up there," he said, "we'll shoot them all down. We won't allow you to invade our planet." The air in the interrogation room became dense, charged with an energy I had never felt before. The creature, still bleeding from the amputation of its finger, looked at us with a mixture of desperation and contained fury. It was then that everything changed. Suddenly, a wave of telepathic power hit us, paralyzing each one of us. I couldn't move, not even blink. It was as if my body was trapped in an invisible block of ice. My thoughts were racing, but my muscles weren't responding. The creature's voice resonated in our minds with devastating force. "I will not allow you to murder my race." And then the chaos began. In our minds, hallucinations came to life, intense and horribly vivid. I saw my comrades, men I had trained and fought with, transform into monstrous creatures, their faces twisted by hatred and pain. Screams filled the room, a cacophony of terror that mixed with reality. One of the soldiers to my left began to hit his head against the wall over and over again until blood splattered the metal surface. Another drew his weapon and fired into the air, his eyes completely bulging, before pointing at himself and pulling the trigger. Bodies fell like broken dolls, their lives extinguishing in the midst of self-destructive madness. I felt how, against my will, my hand moved towards my gun. I fought with all my strength to stop myself, but it was like trying to stop an unstoppable current. Desperation enveloped me, and in the midst of that whirlwind of terror, the creature's voice kept resonating, a mixture of plea and warning. "Stop this!" I shouted mentally, with every fiber of my being focused on that single plea. "I'll take you to your ship, but please stop this." The creature seemed to hesitate for a moment. I could feel its anguish, its desperation, as if they were my own. Finally, with a visible effort, the telepathic pressure began to diminish. My rigid and painful muscles started to respond again. The interrogation room was now a mental battlefield, the bodies of my comrades lying scattered, some still with final spasms. The stench of blood and gunpowder filled the air, mixed with the bitter taste of fear. Trembling, I approached the creature. Its eyes met mine, and at that moment I felt a deep connection, a mutual understanding of our shared suffering. With my nose bleeding from the telepathic attack, I staggered but managed to stay on my feet. The creature on the stretcher looked at me weakly, and its pain resonated in my mind. There was no time to lose. I quickly covered it with a black blanket, hiding its alien form. I rushed out of the military clinic through the emergency exit, the cold night air hitting my face, clearing my mind enough to keep going. Every step was a struggle against dizziness and confusion, but I knew I had to reach the bunker where the remains of the ship were located. The race to the bunker was frantic. I stumbled several times. My strength faltered, but I was driven by the urgency of our mission. Upon arrival, I saw my team waiting outside, their faces a mixture of concern and confusion at seeing me in this state. "Sergeant, what's going on?" exclaimed one of them, his gaze fixed on the covered stretcher. "We're under attack," I said firmly, not stopping. "Head to the medical room right now. I need to secure this." My men, although confused, obeyed without hesitation. They knew there was no room for questioning in the midst of an emergency. As they walked away, I pushed the stretcher into the bunker, closing the heavy door behind us. Inside the bunker, the silence was oppressive. I took a moment to catch my breath, my hands trembling as I removed the blanket covering the creature. Its eyes, filled with pain, met mine, and I felt its gratitude and urgency. "What do we do now?" I murmured, but its exterior was solid and robust. Carefully, I took it to the stretcher. The creature raised a trembling hand and touched the surface of the box. A soft hum filled the air, followed by an intense light that emanated from the box, illuminating the entire bunker. I instinctively stepped back, shielding my eyes with one hand as energy emanated from the box. I felt a wave of emotions in my mind: gratitude, sadness, and a deep apology. The creature's voice resonated in my mind, clear and serene. "I'm sorry," it said. "We didn't want to cause harm. We're just trying to survive." The intensity of the light increased, and the hum turned into a roar. Suddenly, a brilliant glow flooded the bunker, followed by an intense buzz that filled my ears. The light was blinding, forcing me to cover my eyes with my hands. I felt a surge of heat and energy around me, as if the air itself vibrated with an indescribable force. After a few seconds, that felt like an eternity. The glow began to diminish. I slowly opened my eyes, blinking to adjust my sight. The bunker was silent once again, and when I finally managed to recover my vision, I realized that the creature had disappeared. I immediately understood that the rescue had been successful. The creature had been safely transported, far from the nightmare we had lived through. I tried to stand up, but the combination of exhaustion and injuries was too much for me. My legs gave way, and I fell to the floor, darkness quickly enveloping me as I passed out. A final thought crossed my mind. I had fulfilled my promise, but the cost of that desperate pact was something I still couldn't fully comprehend. As I opened my eyes, I saw familiar faces around me. My family and some of my team members were there, their gazes filled with concern. Relief washed over them as they saw me wake up. My mother grabbed my hand, her eyes teary, and I felt a lump of emotion form in my throat. Where am I?" I mumbled. "You're in the recovery room of the military hospital," said a firm voice from the other side of the room. I turned my head with effort and saw Dr. Richards, the base's chief physician, approach my bed. "You've been unconscious for several days." I tried to process the information, but my mind was foggy. Fragments of memories began to emerge: the bunker, the metal box, the disappeared creature. I felt a pang of anguish and confusion. "What happened?" I asked, trying to order my thoughts. "The creature—" "Easy, Sergeant," said Dr. Richards, placing a hand on my shoulder. "You suffered extreme exposure to an unknown energy source, which caused you to collapse. But fortunately, there's no permanent damage. You're in the process of recovery, and we expect to discharge you in a couple of days." I nodded, trying to process the information. Fragments of memories began to surface. The bunker, the metal box, the intense light, but everything was blurry and confusing. Shortly after, the door to the room opened again, and a high-ranking military officer entered, carrying a folder in his hands. His presence was imposing and authoritative. "I need to speak with Sergeant Miller in private," he said, and those present, except for the doctor, left the room. The officer approached my bed, his gaze fixed on mine. "I'm General Hawkins," he said, opening the folder. "I want to know what happened in the other room." Still disoriented, I tried to remember clearly. "I remember the creature used some kind of mental power," I began, my voice shaky. "Then everything went dark. I don't know what happened after that." The general nodded, his expression impassive. "The creature killed everyone in the room," he revealed, his voice cold. "I need to know how you managed to escape." A chill ran down my spine as I heard those words. The image of my fallen comrades returned to my mind, but everything was still a chaos of fragmented memories. "I don't know," I insisted, feeling the pressure increase. "I don't remember anything else. It's blocked." The doctor intervened at that moment. "It's possible that traumatic stress has blocked some of his memories," he explained, looking at the general. "He needs time to process what he's been through." General Hawkins assessed the situation for a moment before speaking again. "When you're discharged, I want you to write a detailed report of everything you remember," he ordered. "And make sure to attend your comrade's funeral. They deserve our respect and tribute." I nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility and guilt. "Yes, sir," I responded, my voice firm despite the storm of emotions inside me. The funeral was a solemn and painful event. I stood next to the graves of my comrades, feeling a mixture of sadness and guilt. The military ceremony was a tribute to their sacrifices, but inside I struggled with the reality of being the only survivor. After the funeral, I locked myself in my room with a pen and a notebook. I took a deep breath and began to write. With each word I wrote, the burden of the secret became lighter. But I knew I would always carry the weight of that night with me. The truth about the extraterrestrial encounter, the horrors I witnessed, and the loss of my comrades were indelible parts of my story. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. I found myself grappling with a reality that no one else could understand. The nightmares were relentless, vivid recreations of that fateful night in the bunker. I'd wake up in cold sweats, the echoes of alien thoughts still reverberating in my mind. The official story, was that there had been a tragic accident during a classified military exercise. Families were given folded flags and hollow words of comfort. I attended each funeral, looking into the eyes of widows and fatherless children, knowing that I carried a truth that could never be spoken. My superiors kept a close watch on me. I was subjected to countless debriefings, each one more intense than the last. They wanted to know every detail, every nuance of my encounter with the creature. I stuck to my story, that my memories were fragmented, that the trauma had blocked out crucial details. It wasn't entirely a lie. There were still gaps in my recollection, moments lost to the fog of that surreal experience. But there were things I remembered with crystal clarity. The creature's eyes, filled with a mixture of fear and wisdom beyond human comprehension. The sensation of its thoughts merging with mine, a connection so profound it defied description. And most haunting of all, the realization that we, humanity, might not be alone in the universe, and that our first true contact had been marked by violence and misunderstanding. I was offered a promotion, a cushy desk job far from the field. It was clear they wanted to keep me close, to ensure that their secrets remained buried. I accepted, knowing that refusing might lead to more questions, more scrutiny. My days became a monotonous blur of paperwork and veiled observations. Every now and then, I'd catch a glimpse of General Hawkins in the hallways, his eyes always watching, always suspicious. In my free time, I found myself drawn to astronomy. I'd spend hours gazing at the night sky, wondering about the vastness of space and the countless worlds that might exist out there. Sometimes, I'd focus on the Aquila constellation, remembering the creature's words about its home. Was Zephyr out there somewhere, looking back at our tiny blue planet? I tried to move on with my life. I dated, attempting to forge connections with people who could never truly understand what I'd been through. Each relationship ended the same way, with a growing distance as they sensed the weight of the secrets I carried. One night, about a year after the incident, I received an unexpected visitor. It was Johnson, one of the few members of my old team who hadn't been in the room during the creature's mental attack. He looked haggard, his eyes darting nervously as I invited him in. "I can't take it anymore, Sarge," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The lies, the cover-ups. Do you know what they're doing with the technology we recovered?" I felt a chill run down my spine. "Johnson, we shouldn't be talking about this." He let out a bitter laugh. "They're reverse engineering it. Weapons beyond anything we've ever seen. They're preparing for war, Sarge. A war against enemies we don't understand, using technology we can barely comprehend." I tried to calm him down, but his words had stirred something inside me. The guilt I'd been carrying, the weight of my silence, it all came crashing down. I realized that by staying quiet, I might be complicit in something far more dangerous than I'd imagined. That night, after Johnson left, I made a decision. I couldn't change the past, couldn't bring back those who had died, but perhaps I could shape the future. I began to write, not just the sanitized reports my superiors expected, but the full, unvarnished truth. Every detail I could remember, every observation about the creature and its technology, and most importantly, its message of peaceful intent. I knew the risks. Whistleblowers in the military didn't tend to fare well, especially when dealing with information this sensitive. But I couldn't shake the feeling that humanity was at a crossroads. Our first contact with an alien species had been marred by fear and violence. If we continued down this path, weaponizing technology we didn't understand, we risked not just our own destruction, but potentially that of other worlds as well. As I wrote, I felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time since that night in the desert, I felt like I was doing the right thing. I didn't know if my words would ever see the light of day, if they would change anything, but I had to try. For the sake of my fallen comrades, for the creature that had shown me glimpses of a universe beyond our understanding, and for the future of humanity itself. I finished writing just as the first light of dawn began to creep through my window. I saved the document on an encrypted drive and hid it carefully. Then I sat back and watched the sun rise, wondering what the new day would bring. Whatever happened, I knew that my life had been irrevocably changed by that encounter in the New Mexico desert. The truth was out there, and I had become its unlikely guardian. As the days passed, I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, paranoid that my actions might have been discovered. The military base seemed to operate as usual, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched more closely than before. General Hawkins' piercing gaze seemed to follow me everywhere, and I often wondered if he suspected what I had done. I continued my work, trying to maintain a facade of normalcy while grappling with the weight of my secret. The encrypted drive containing my full account felt like a ticking time bomb, hidden away, but always present in my thoughts. I knew I needed to find a way to get the information out, but I had to be careful. One wrong move could not only endanger myself, but potentially trigger a chain of events with far-reaching consequences. It was during this time that I began to notice strange occurrences around me. Electronic devices would malfunction in my presence, and I'd sometimes catch glimpses of shadowy figures in my peripheral vision. At first, I dismissed these as manifestations of my stress and paranoia, but as they became more frequent, I couldn't help but wonder if there was something more to it. One night, as I lay in bed unable to sleep, I felt a familiar presence in my mind. It was faint, like a whisper on the edge of consciousness, but unmistakable. The alien thoughts I had experienced during my encounter with Zephyr seemed to be reaching out to me across vast distances. Fragments of images and emotions flooded my mind, a sense of urgency, a looming threat, and beneath it all, a plea for understanding. I sat up, my heart racing. Was I losing my mind, or was Zephyr actually trying to communicate with me? The sensation faded as quickly as it had come, leaving me breathless and confused. But it also left me with a renewed sense of purpose. Whatever was happening, whatever forces were at play, I knew that my role in this cosmic drama was far from over. The next day, I made a decision. I couldn't wait any longer to act. Using my military clearance, I accessed some of the classified files related to the incident. What I found chilled me to the bone. There were reports of other encounters, not just in Roswell, but across the globe. Most had been covered up, explained away as weather balloons or military exercises, but the pattern was clear. Our governments were aware of extraterrestrial presence and were actively working to keep it hidden. As I dug deeper, I uncovered mentions of a top-secret facility where recovered alien technology was being studied. The reports were vague, but they hinted at breakthroughs that could revolutionize everything from energy production to weapons systems. It was exactly as Johnson had warned. We were on the brink of wielding power we couldn't possibly understand, driven by fear and a misguided sense of security. I knew I had to get this information out, but I also realized that simply dumping it on the internet would likely do more harm than good. The public wasn't ready for the full truth, and an uncontrolled revelation could lead to panic and chaos. I needed a plan, a way to gradually introduce the reality of extraterrestrial life while emphasizing the importance of peaceful contact. It was then that I remembered an old friend from my college days, now an investigative journalist known for her integrity and careful handling of sensitive information. If anyone could help me navigate this minefield, it was her. I reached out, using a secure line and speaking in coded language we had developed years ago. We arranged to meet in a crowded public place where we could talk without arousing suspicion. As I prepared for the meeting, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The base seemed unusually quiet, and even my colleagues appeared to be giving me a wide berth. Had my actions already been discovered? Was I walking into a trap? Despite my fears, I knew I had to proceed. The fate of not just our world, but potentially countless others, hung in the balance. As I left my quarters, heading towards what could be either my salvation or my downfall, I silently hoped that wherever Zephyr was, whatever forces were at play in the vast expanse of the universe, they were on my side. The coffee shop was bustling with activity when I arrived, the cacophony of voices and clinking cups providing the perfect cover for a clandestine meeting. I spotted Sarah, my journalist friend, sitting in a corner booth, her eyes scanning the room with practiced nonchalance. As I approached, I could see the mix of concern and curiosity in her expression. "Long time no see, stranger," she said, as I slid into the seat across from her. "You sounded pretty serious on the phone. What's going on?" I took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. How do you tell someone that everything they know about the world is about to change? "Sarah, what I'm about to tell you is going to sound crazy," I began, keeping my voice low. "But I need you to listen with an open mind. Lives depend on it, maybe the fate of our entire species." Her eyebrows shot up, but she remained silent, waiting for me to continue. I started from the beginning, telling her about the crash in the New Mexico desert, the creature we found, and the subsequent cover-up. As I spoke, I could see the disbelief in her eyes slowly give way to a dawning realization of the magnitude of what I was revealing. "My God," she whispered when I finished. This is beyond anything I could have imagined. But why come to me? Why now?" I leaned in closer, my voice barely above a whisper. "Because they're weaponizing the technology, Sarah. They're preparing for a war that doesn't need to happen, and I have proof. Documents, records of other encounters. But I can't just dump this on the world. It needs to be handled carefully, or we risk global panic." Sarah nodded slowly, her journalistic instincts clearly kicking in. "You're right. This needs to be approached delicately. We need to build a narrative, introduce the concept gradually. But we'll need more than just your word. Do you have any physical evidence?" I hesitated for a moment before reaching into my pocket and pulling out a small object wrapped in cloth. Carefully, I unwrapped it to reveal a small, metallic fragment, a piece of the alien craft I had managed to secret away during the initial recovery operation. Sarah's eyes widened as she looked at the object. Even in the dim light of the coffee shop, the metal seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly quality. "Is this—" I nodded. "A piece of their ship. I've kept it hidden all this time. It's not much, but it's a start." As Sarah reached out to touch the fragment, I felt a sudden, sharp pain in my head. The world around me seemed to blur, and for a moment, I thought I could hear Zephyr's voice again, urgent and pleading. The coffee shop faded away, replaced by flashing images, stars, distant worlds, and a sense of impending doom. "Are you okay?" Sarah's voice brought me back to reality. I blinked, realizing I had gripped the edge of the table so hard my knuckles had turned white. "Yeah, I'm fine," I lied, trying to shake off the disorienting experience. "Just a lot of stress lately." Sarah looked skeptical but didn't press the issue. "All right, here's what we're going to do," she said, slipping the metal fragment into her bag. "I have contacts, scientists, other journalists, people who can help verify this information. We'll start small, releasing bits of information, building credibility. It's going to take time, but we'll get the truth out there." As we finalized our plans, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were racing against time. The visions, if that's what they were, had left me with a sense of urgency I couldn't fully explain. Whatever was coming, whatever threat loomed on the horizon, I knew we had to act fast. Leaving the coffee shop, I felt a mix of relief and trepidation. I had taken the first step, set in motion a chain of events that could change the course of human history. But as I walked back to the base, I couldn't help but feel that I was being followed. Shadows seemed to move at the edge of my vision, and every passing car felt like a potential threat. I entered my quarters, my mind racing with the implications of what I had just done. As I closed the door behind me, I heard a sound that made my blood run cold, the unmistakable click of a gun being cocked. "I'm disappointed in you, Sergeant." General Hawkins' voice came from the darkness of my room. "I thought you understood the importance of secrecy in this matter." As the lights flickered on, I found myself face to face with the man who had been my superior, now revealed as my adversary. Behind him stood 2 armed soldiers, their weapons trained on me. "You don't understand what you're dealing with," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We're making a mistake. The aliens, they're not our enemies." Hawkins' face twisted into a sneer. "You've been compromised, Sergeant. Whatever that thing did to your mind, it's clouded your judgment. We're at war, whether you want to believe it or not." I raised my hands slowly, my mind racing to find a way out of this situation. "General, please, think about what you're doing. We have an opportunity here for peaceful contact, for advancement beyond our wildest dreams. Why throw that away for a war we don't need to fight?" The general's eyes narrowed. "Peaceful contact. Tell that to the men who died in that room. Tell that to every soldier throughout history who's fallen protecting our way of life from threats beyond our borders. No, Sergeant. We will use every advantage we can get to ensure our survival." As he spoke, I felt a familiar pressure building in my head. The room seemed to shimmer, and for a brief moment, I saw not the stern face of General Hawkins, but the pleading eyes of Zephyr. The alien's voice echoed in my mind. "Show them. Make them understand." Without fully comprehending what I was doing, I reached out with my mind, focusing on the connection I had felt with the alien. Suddenly, the room was filled with a blinding light. The soldiers cried out in surprise, their weapons clattering to the floor as they shielded their eyes. In that moment of confusion, I acted. I lunged forward, tackling General Hawkins to the ground. We grappled, rolling across the floor as the light continued to pulse around us. I could hear the soldiers shouting, their voices filled with panic and confusion. "Stop!" Hawkins yelled, struggling beneath me. "What have you done to us?" But I barely heard him. My mind was filled with a torrent of images and sensations. I saw vast cities on distant worlds, technologies beyond our comprehension, and the devastating consequences of interstellar conflict. And through it all, I felt an overwhelming sense of hope, a vision of a future where humanity had taken its place among the stars, not as conquerors, but as partners in a grand cosmic community. As quickly as it had come, the vision faded, the light dimmed, leaving us in the now eerily quiet room. I rolled off Hawkins, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The general lay still, his eyes wide and unfocused. Did you see?" I managed to say. Slowly, Hawkins nodded. "I saw everything," he whispered, his voice trembling. "My God, what have we been doing?" The soldiers, still disoriented, lowered their weapons. One of them, a young private, spoke up. "Sir, what just happened?" I stood up shakily, offering a hand to Hawkins. To my surprise, he took it, allowing me to help him to his feet. "We've been given a second chance," I said, looking around at the bewildered faces. "A chance to make this right." Hawkins straightened his uniform, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. I need to make some calls," he said finally. "This changes everything." As the general left the room, issuing hurried orders to the soldiers, I sank onto my bed, my mind reeling from what had just transpired. Somehow, through my connection with Zephyr, I had been able to share the truth, not just the facts, but the deep, emotional reality of our place in the universe. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Hawkins, true to his word, had initiated a series of high-level meetings. I found myself briefing not just military officials, but politicians, scientists, and even religious leaders. The story we had worked so hard to keep secret was now being carefully, strategically revealed to those in positions of power and influence. Sarah, my journalist friend, played a crucial role in managing the public narrative. Working with a team of trusted colleagues, she began releasing carefully crafted stories, hints of extraterrestrial life, scientific breakthroughs inspired by unknown sources, and philosophical pieces on humanity's place in the cosmos. The process was slow, methodical, and not without its challenges. There were those who resisted, who clung to old fears and prejudices, but with each passing day, I saw a shift in the way people thought about our place in the universe. Months turned into years. The world changed, not overnight, but in small, significant ways. International cooperation increased as nations realized the importance of presenting a unified front to the galaxy. Resources once devoted to weapons development were redirected towards space exploration and clean energy technologies, inspired by what we had learned from the alien craft. And then, 5 years to the day after my encounter in the New Mexico desert, it happened. A signal, clear and unmistakable, broadcast across every communication channel on Earth. The message was simple: we come in peace. As I stood with Sarah, General Hawkins, and a group of world leaders watching the sleek alien ship descend from the sky, I felt a mix of emotions: excitement, apprehension, and above all, hope. This was the moment we had been preparing for, the culmination of years of work and sacrifice. The ship landed, its surface shimmering with that same otherworldly quality I remembered from the fragment. As the hatch opened, I held my breath, my heart pounding in my chest. And there, standing at the entrance, was a figure I recognized immediately. Zephyr, looking exactly as I remembered from that fateful night, stepped out onto Earth soil. Our eyes met, and I felt that familiar connection, not of fear or misunderstanding, but of mutual respect and the promise of a shared future. As Zephyr approached, flanked by a delegation of humans and aliens alike, I realized that this was just the beginning. We had taken our first steps into a larger universe, one filled with wonders and challenges beyond our imagining. The road ahead would not be easy, but for the first time in a long time, I felt truly optimistic about the future of humanity. Zephyr reached out, offering a hand in the human gesture of greeting we had taught them. As I took it, I felt a sense of completion, of coming full circle. The nightmare of that night in the desert had led to this moment of hope and new beginnings. "Welcome to Earth," I said, my voice steady and clear. "We have so much to learn from each other." Zephyr's response, transmitted directly into my mind, filled me with joy. "And we have much to learn from you, friends. Together, we will build a future among the stars." As the world watched, human and alien stood side by side, ready to embark on the greatest adventure in the history of our species. The universe, in all its vast mystery and wonder, awaited us.